I've worked in food service for about 6 years now, but nothing quite compares to my last job at this combination pizza place and gas station. The owner had this brilliant idea of serving fresh-made pizzas at a gas station, which actually worked well enough during regular hours. But working the night shift, that was a whole different story. The pay wasn't great, but I needed the money for college, and the flexible hours worked with my class schedule. Most nights were manageable, even if customers could be a bit rough around the edges, but working on Christmas night, that was pushing my limits. I was alone in the kitchen as usual for the night shift. The owner insisted on staying open until 11 p.m., even on Christmas, because customers expect service. What customers actually expected was instant service, despite being the only person handling everything from orders to cooking to cleaning. The night had already been rough. I'd just gotten off a phone call with some guy who spent 5 solid minutes yelling at me because I couldn't make him a pizza in 3 minutes flat. I tried explaining to him that the physics of cooking required at least 8 minutes for the oven to properly cook a pizza. He just called me lazy and threatened never to return to our store. I simply wished him a good night and hung up. I had just hung up, trying to calm down while handling the 2 orders I had left and starting on the closing cleaning duties. That's when he walked in, this grown man stumbling around like a toddler who'd gotten into the cookie jar, except his cookies were clearly several bottles of Christmas cheer. When the drunk man first approached the counter, he slurred his words as he asked if the kitchen was still open. I told him we had about 40 minutes left. He then demanded a medium jalapeno pizza, insisting that I make it 4 times spicier than normal. When I tried to warn him about the heat level, he rudely cut me off and threatened to punch my lights out if the pizza wasn't ready in 10 minutes. Then he stumbled off to the bathroom. I stood there, blood boiling but hands tied, by our must-serve all walk-ins policy. That's when I had my moment of clarity. He wanted spicy. Oh, I'd give him spicy. I prepped that pizza with surgical precision. One by one, I counted out exactly 103 jalapenos, making sure to cover every square inch of that pizza. But why stop there? I carefully drizzled jalapeno juice across the top, added a generous helping of hot sauce, and finished it with a kiss of buffalo sauce. It was beautiful, a monument to malicious compliance. The pizza came out of the oven looking perfectly normal on the surface. The cheese had melted just right, hiding the inferno beneath. When he returned, swaying slightly less but no more pleasant, I politely offered to let him check the pizza before paying. He dismissed the idea completely, demanding I just ring him up. He paid and left, and I started counting down in my head. 3 minutes later, right on schedule, he burst back through the door. His face was bright red, sweat pouring down his forehead, making a beeline for our dairy cooler. He was gasping and desperately asking for milk between labored breaths. He grabbed a gallon, slammed it on the counter with shaking hands, and threw his money at me. Before I could even finish ringing him up, he had the cap off and was chugging it like his life depended on it. Then, without a word, he ran out the door, leaving a trail of milk drops behind him. I never saw him again, but I did notice some milk footprints in the parking lot the next day. I also noticed that the bathroom trash can was full of tissues. Seems like someone had quite a runny nose that night. The next day, the owner questioned me about a complaint regarding an inedible pizza. I simply showed him the security footage of the drunk man threatening to punch me, and suddenly there wasn't any issue with the pizza anymore. When I was a kid in the Southwest, I had a really bad stutter. My mom helped me for years to get better at speaking. The good thing was that all that practice made me talk really clearly, without the usual accent people had around me. But in middle school, that backfired. Other kids made fun of me because I didn't sound like them. That's when I decided to get creative. I threw myself into learning accents, starting with classic westerns and eventually branching out to all sorts of TV shows and movies. I mastered everything from Scottish, thanks to Star Trek's Scotty, to German, Hogan's Heroes was a goldmine, to various Asian accents from kung fu films. It became a fun party trick, though it did have one awkward side effect. I tend to unconsciously mirror people's accents when talking to them, which has led to some uncomfortable explanations. Fast forward to my job at a call center, where I worked as an escalation specialist. Basically, when someone demanded to speak to a manager or their issue was beyond a regular agent's authority, they got transferred to my team. One day, I was joking around with my supervisor using an Indian accent when a call came in. Without thinking, I answered, still using that accent. The woman immediately started screaming at me, demanding someone who speaks English. She then launched into a racist tirade that I won't repeat. I quickly dropped the accent and tried to speak normally, but she wasn't having it. She continued ranting about being sick of foreign call centers and demanding a real American who speaks proper English. When she started insulting my parents, that's where I drew the line. That's when inspiration struck. Using my Indian accent again, I asked if she wanted to speak with someone who speaks English. When she frantically confirmed this, I explained that I would transfer her, but warned her not to disconnect for any reason due to high call volume. I told her she was currently at the top of the queue, but if she hung up and called back, she'd end up at the bottom of the line. She desperately agreed to stay on the line, so I wished her a pleasant day and put her on hold. This was technically against policy, but my supervisor was listening in and gave me a knowing smile. When he asked what I was doing, I explained that I was giving her exactly what she asked for, someone who speaks English. Every 5 minutes I came back with a new accent. First with a Russian accent, asking how I could help her today. She frustratedly demanded someone who speaks English. Then I came back with a German accent, causing her to exclaim about how ridiculous the situation was. I continued with French, putting on my best accent to ask how I could help. Then came Swedish, Italian, my Mario Brothers impression I was proud of, and even Pirate, where I asked what was troubling her in my best seafaring voice. For over an hour this went on. My supervisor was barely containing his laughter as this woman got increasingly desperate. Finally, when she was nearly in tears, I answered with my thickest southern drawl, greeting her warmly. She broke down sobbing with relief, thanking God for finally getting someone who speaks proper English. She spent 10 minutes complaining about her horrible experience of being transferred around the world for over an hour. When she finally explained her actual problem, it was something so simple a regular agent could have solved it in 2 minutes. After resolving her issue, I couldn't resist one final touch. I switched back to my Indian accent and told her it was my pleasure to handle her call, then mentioned how funny it was that she sounded just like a woman I spoke to an hour ago, pointing out how strange life could be. The sound of her incoherent scream of rage was cut off as I hung up. My supervisor gave me a standing ovation, and the recording of that call became legendary in our call center's training sessions as an example of malicious compliance at its finest. Worth mentioning, that woman tried to call back to complain about me, but since she didn't know my name, I was the same person all along after all, and there was no record of multiple transfers since I'd just been putting her on hold. There was nothing she could do. I've been riding motorcycles for almost a decade now. While I do own a car, I prefer my bike for most trips. It's more fuel efficient and honestly, just more fun. I'm in my early 30s and with my long hair, beard and glasses, I look like your typical hipster when I'm not in my riding gear. Though some people say I look like a motorcycle thug when I'm all geared up, most folks tell me I have a pretty gentle face when they can actually see it. I've learned to be careful about where I park my bike. People can be real jerks sometimes. I once caught someone sitting on my parked motorcycle trying to take selfies. Since then, I try to park where there's decent foot traffic and visibility. So there I was, heading to the store for a quick grocery run. The parking lot was pretty packed near the entrance, and I was about to give up and park in the back when I spotted this silver Audi. The driver had done a terrible job parking, taking up almost 2 spaces with the passenger side slightly over the line. While no car could fit in the remaining space, it was perfect for my motorcycle. I pulled in, switched off the engine, and had just taken off my helmet when this woman appeared out of nowhere. She looked to be around 30, with that distinct "I demand to speak to your manager" haircut that you hear about but rarely see in real life. She immediately started yelling at me, demanding to know what I thought I was doing and insisting that I couldn't park there. When I asked her what she meant, she got even more aggressive, shouting that the spaces weren't meant for motorcycles and that I was blocking her car. I was caught off guard by her aggressive tone. My bike was completely within the lines, and while it was near her passenger door, there was plenty of room to get in. I told her that I was allowed to park there since I was a customer just like her. She wouldn't hear it, screaming that I wasn't allowed to park there and that she couldn't get into her car. I pointed out that she was the one who had parked over the line and suggested that if she was leaving, she should just go. This really set her off. She started screaming at me not to talk to her that way, called me a jerk, and threatened to call the police. I was wearing sunglasses so she couldn't see me roll my eyes. If she'd asked nicely, I might have moved, but her attitude made me stand my ground. I told her to leave me alone. What happened next was surreal. She actually stormed over and tried to push my motorcycle over. I rushed forward, grabbed her wrists, and pushed her away from my bike. She let out this piercing scream like something from a horror movie, yelling that I had assaulted her. A few people were watching and someone called the police. She stood behind my bike to prevent me from leaving, grinning like she'd won some victory. She started taunting me, saying I was going to prison for attacking her and hoping I would get what I deserve in there. When the police officer arrived, he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Before he could say a word, the woman launched into this wild story, claiming that I was a gang member who had parked illegally, threatened her when she politely asked me to move, and punched her in the face. The officer looked at her supposedly punched face, which didn't have a single mark, then turned to me for my version. I explained everything while she kept trying to interrupt. The officer told her that if she was claiming I hit her, they could check the store's security cameras. He then pointed out that her car was actually the one parked illegally. She responded by calling him an idiot and again insisting that I couldn't park there. The officer told her he was writing her a ticket for being verbally abusive and illegal parking. That's when she completely lost it. She actually tried to slap the officer. Her aim was terrible, but it didn't matter. Within seconds, she was face down on her Audi's trunk, being handcuffed. The officer told her she was under arrest for assaulting an officer. She started screaming and threw in some racist slurs for good measure. When she was being put in the police car, she alternated between screaming threats and sobbing. The officer asked if I wanted to press charges, but I declined. She'd already earned herself enough trouble. He promised to keep an eye on her car while I shopped, in case any of her friends showed up looking for revenge. I never saw her again, but I heard a few weeks later that she'd gotten 6 months probation and had to take anger management classes. The employees celebrated when they heard she'd been banned from the store. These days, whenever I see a silver Audi badly parked across 2 spaces, I make sure to give it a wide berth. You never know when you might run into another entitled driver who thinks they own the whole parking lot. I've been a middle school teacher for about 8 years, and I love it. I grew up in the West Valley of Phoenix. Go Suns! In a community where lots of people spoke Spanish. By the time I finished high school, I was fluent, and that has been really helpful in my teaching career. My bilingual abilities really came in handy when we got 2 new students who didn't speak a word of English. The teacher running the English language learner program approached me with an opportunity to tutor these kids twice a week. The deal seemed straightforward enough. I'd work with them during my 7th-hour prep period on Mondays and Fridays. I'd clock in 15 minutes before 2:20 p.m. for prep time and work until 3:30 p.m. when the students went home. Plus, I get an additional 15 minutes of prep time for every hour worked. Sweet deal, right? Everything was going great. The kids were making fantastic progress and I was getting paid for helping them learn English. Win-win situation all around. Or so I thought. Then came the email that made my blood boil. It was the end of the school year, and apparently, I was being docked 11.5 hours because I had punched in before the end of the day. They claimed I was getting double paid for these hours. I was furious. I went through every single document I had signed, every contract, every piece of paperwork. Nowhere, and I mean nowhere, did it specify when I was supposed to punch in for these hours. They called me into the office for a meeting. Present were my direct supervisor and this lady from the Federal Action Plan office who I'll call Karen. She had this document she wanted me to sign, acknowledging that I owed these hours back. Karen kept insisting that I sign the document immediately, repeatedly stating that I couldn't get double paid. When I asked to see where in my contract it specifically stated when I was supposed to punch in these hours, she dismissed my question as irrelevant, maintaining her stance about not being able to get paid twice for the same time. When I pressed her to show me where this was written in the contract, she just kept pushing the paper at me, growing increasingly frustrated and demanding that I sign it right away, saying we didn't have all day. Fine. They wanted a signature, they'd get one. I signed it all right with my middle name, which just happened to be Screw This. Why? Because I knew something they didn't. The person who would be reviewing this paperwork at the district office, let's call her District Office Savior. She and I go way back. Just as I expected, my phone rang during my 7th hour prep the very next day. District Office Savior called about my interesting signature and asked what was going on. I explained everything, working with the 2 non-English speaking students all year, teaching them English from scratch, and how nobody had said a word about any timing restrictions until now. She then asked me a series of questions. Was I doing this during my prep time? Was I bilingual? And did I have an English language learner endorsement certificate? I confirmed all these points, mentioning that I got my endorsement while working with Spanish-speaking students in the West Valley. After a pause, during which I could swear I heard a suppressed chuckle, she said that was all she needed to know. A couple of weeks later, I got my paycheck. I had to do a double take because it was $3,500 more than usual. I was completely confused until I got another call from District Office Savior. She explained that since I was working during my contracted prep time and I had an English language learner endorsement while my direct supervisor didn't, I actually qualified as an English language learner leader on campus, which came with quite a nice stipend. When I asked about the hours they wanted to dock, she told me what she clearly thought was the best part. Instead of them docking my pay $345, they now owed me 10 times that amount, and it was coming directly out of Karen's Federal Action Plan budget. When I asked if she was serious, she confirmed it with obvious satisfaction, pointing out that Karen was right about one thing. I couldn't get double paid. I was getting paid 5 times more instead. So that's how Karen's attempt to dock my pay for helping kids learn English backfired spectacularly. Instead of saving her department $345, she ended up having to pay out $3,500 from her budget. Those 2 students are now fluent in English and doing great in their classes. That's worth more than any paycheck, but the extra money sure was a nice bonus.